this year we started on a series. We wanted to grow as a church, as a community. And we started off and we looked at it from a multidimensional lens. We wanted to grow in influence. We wanted to grow in our relationship. We wanted to grow in spiritual fervency. And we've covered all these themes or series for the past couple of months. And last week we started a new series on growing in the area of our physical and mental well-being. And because I believe it's important, you can be spiritual, you can want to have influence and do all of that, but if you're not right in the mind, in your soul, if you're not right, you don't have the right body, the right energy in your body, you can't really do all those things. So I think it's important that we talk about growth as it concerns our health, and also see what the Bible tells us about growth. Hallelujah. And so I'll take my reading today from the book of Mark 6, verse 30 to 32. Let me put my timer. I know I have about 32 minutes because we have a bit activities today. Mark 6, verse 30 to 32, it says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. But then, when so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, and Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Let me read that again. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." This morning, I want to talk on what I've titled, Get Some Rest. Can you help me just look around and maybe help me just, maybe you don't need to say it out to avoid spitting on someone. You could just point on someone and tell the person, in your heart, get some rest, Get some rest. Don't say it out, okay? We're trying to be COVID safe. Get some rest. Yeah, get some rest. Get some rest. Hallelujah. Thank God for Pastor Ofori, because last week he started our series on growing in physical health and well-being, and sort of established that living in good health starts with the fear of God. I think that's very important, because for us to live in great health, it has to start with the fear of God. He took a passage from Proverbs 3, from 7 to 8. It says, "Do not be wise in your own eyes, for the fear of God," one, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear of the Lord and shun evil. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Two foundational truths that we must acknowledge in this verse. The first is that good health starts from the fear of the Lord. Now, some might ask, what is the fear of the Lord? Of course, to fear God does not necessarily mean to be horrified about God or to be horrified about his majesty, but it's all about having admiration. It's about having obedience towards God. It's about love. It's about having an unconditional worship and submission to God. And once we trust in God, because admiration, when you admire someone and you submit to someone, it means that you trust the person. And once you trust in God, our knowledge and experience of him will become real as we depend on him. And so the fear of God is when we move towards God to see him for who he is. And in our humility, he lifts us up and he stands us up. And the more we fear him and see him as he high and exalted and lifted, the more actually we experience intimacy with him. And out of this intimacy springs forth the things that strengthen us when we are weak. Out of this intimacy, we get peace for our soul. Out of this intimacy, we get restoration of hope, especially when we're hopeless. And out of this intimacy, we get an outpouring of love when we're lonely. And out of this intimacy, we get the joy of the Spirit. Now you see that essentially, for us to have a good health, it must start from having the fear of God. But the second thing the passage tells us is that we should also shun evil. Shun evil for us to have a good health. What does the writer actually mean by shunning evil? It simply means what it is, to just abstain from anything that is impure or anything that is morally questionable that puts your health at risk. I'm sure you know what it is. Doing a bit extra, maybe drinking too much, that puts your body at risk, or even it could be doing something that could damage your lung. It just, shunning things that, morally questionable, that puts your health at risk. It could be impure thoughts that put your health at risk. Struggling with unforgiveness, having bitterness, it puts your health at risk. It could be impure relationship. For some of us, we are in relationships that we should not be in, that are really messing up with our mind and truncating our mental health. It could be impure actions or even impure career choices. When we shun evil and fear the Lord, we have great health. And so it is important, or rather the importance of having a good, healthy life cannot be overemphasized. It is what separates those that will see their 80s and 90s and those that will give up in their 60s. It is what separates those that will see their children, and those that may not get to see their children. And as we were told last week, good health starts from 4 principles. Number 1 is rest. Number 2, it's exercise. Number 3, it's healthy eating. And the 4th one, it's your company, your relationships. And if we do these 4 things, well and maintain a healthy fear of God and shun evil, we will live in good health, which comes from these things. And so this morning, I want to go a bit deeper to sort of explore these principles in the life of Jesus and the disciples. And I hope that we can learn something from that. And we took a passage from the book of Mark 6. But before I go into the details of the text, I want to sort of define rest, or rather explain what I mean by rest. Rest can sort of be difficult to define because it can mean so many things for different people. For some, it could be binging on Netflix. For some, it could be hanging out with family. For some, it could be eating a good jollof rice. For some, it could be being in church singing. Rest can mean so many things for different people. But really, generally, it simply means a behavior or something that we do that improves or increases our physical and mental well-being. So I want to be careful not to define or give a definition to rest, since it can mean so many things for different people. And rather, I want to look at rest as an acronym that is fundamentally biblical. And so I will look at R as a letter that stands for rehydrate. Can the church say rehydrate? And I'll look at E as a letter that stands for eat well, or eat something. Can the church say eat well? And I'll look at S as a letter that stands for step aside. Can you look around and help me tell someone step aside? And I'll look at T as a letter that stands for talk to someone. Talk to someone. And so in the text that we read, the apostles had come to Jesus after they've been sent out by him on a mission of teaching and healing. The Bible tells us that they were sort of eager to tell their stories and report back to Jesus the things that they did, how demons left people that were in captive, and how people were healed and delivered, and how people gave their life to Christ. And this was the first encounter between the disciples and Jesus after he had sent them out on a mission. And so, because Christ's fame at this time had spread wide and far, and the disciples were so busy spreading the good news and giving witness to the glory of God that they didn't even have time to rest because they were so busy doing ministry. And so, out of compassion, we see Jesus extending love to them and directing them to find refuge in a quiet, deserted place. He invites the disciples in this text, as we see, to a place of rest, to rehydrate after a time of ministry, to eat well for a journey ahead, to step aside with him by themselves, to take care of their body, and to talk to someone. And so the first principle of rest, we need to rehydrate. Can the church say rehydrate? Mark 6:30 to 32 tells us that the disciples gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Now, the principle of rest starts with rehydration. The disciples had gathered around Jesus to tell him all they had done and taught. And when Jesus saw that they had been busy doing ministry, busy doing work, busy booking additional hours from work without giving their body some rest, he said to them to come with me by yourself to a quiet place and get some rest. And so they went away by themselves to a boat, to a solitary place, the Bible tells us. Now, I believe that rest starts with a pause to rehydrate. It starts with a pause to rehydrate. And when I talk about rehydration, you don't just rehydrate, it starts with some kind of retrospection. I know my brother Yao likes saying the word retrospection, in retrospect. But because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have the time and chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourself to a place and get some rest." Now, retrospection is simply using the past to define the future or evaluating what you've done. And by doing that, you get a sense that you need to be rehydrated. We've almost come to the second quarter of the year, and it is possible rather that many of us would have been rehydrated because we're not running at our optimal speed. We're not running the race at our optimal level. And then, therefore, we need to rehydrate as we keep our eyes on the prize, looking up to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. And so when I say we need to rehydrate, I'm simply saying that we need to regulate our physical and spiritual temperature. We need to regulate the things in our life that does not work the way it should work. We need to regulate the things in our lives that are the source of stress. And let me talk a bit about that, because there's so many things that can be the source of stress in our world today. Number one, Facebook. Number two, Twitter. If you stay long enough on social media, someone will put some crap that will really offend you and get to your head. And you know what I do? I don't unfriend them. I just unfollow them so I don't see the updates from the people. We need to rehydrate. We need to rehydrate and regulate the things in our life that are the source of stress. Can you help me? Just look at someone, make sure you don't spit it out or spit on the person, and tell the person, you've had a tough year, you need to rehydrate. Yeah, you need to rehydrate. But there's an interesting thing, the second principle to this, especially when we talk about rehydration, is what Jesus told them. I think the principle of rest also has to start with you. You must make the decision to come by yourself. Jesus is not going to force you to take a rest. Jesus said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place. Jesus was saying it is optional. I'm not going to force you not to look on your Facebook. I'm not going to force you not to do those things that are the source of stress. But you have to come with me by yourself. Underline that. You have to come with me by yourself. It is a personal decision to take a rest and rehydrate. And sometimes out of God's compassion, he forces us to rehydrate. Jesus saw that these disciples, they've been working hard. These guys are not taking rest. They've not eaten. They're still, they want to have chat with me, which is okay, but, they are starving. And Jesus, out of compassion, told them, you know what? I get it. You've done so many things, but now I think it's time to relax. Eat. Find a quiet place and rest. Sometimes it's difficult when you're in this cycle of work. In Australia, we're in a cycle of work. You're working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday, Saturday. Even on Sunday, you need to work on Sunday because they pay you double that day. We're in a cycle of work. And sometimes God, out of compassion, compels us to rest. I had a big year last year. Big year. I had 2 books out. I, did well professionally in my career. And I had a it was very stressful. The amount of work that I did was incredibly challenging. And this year I was just fatigued from January to May, even till now. I'm still a bit fatigued. But with that, I'm still forcing myself to work and write and edit and review and man. And I think it was last month or so, God forced me to rest. All the time we had COVID, I never got sick, but I was not having the time just to get some rest. And like Paul, I was buffeted with COVID. And I was forced for 2 weeks. I was lying in my bed, resting and also recovering from the virus. Sometimes God, out of his compassion, can force us to rest. But the second thing is to eat well. Can you just say eat well? The Bible tells us then, because so many people were coming and going, and they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourself to a quiet place and get some rest. Of course, I cannot often overemphasize the importance of eating well, of good food. Your jollof rice and your chicken, jollof rice, even when it has a lot of, the oil in it is like, taking your cholesterol to another level. Eating well. I cannot emphasize the importance of eating well. 10 o'clock midnight at night, you're swallowing, semolina. I cannot emphasize the importance of eating well. 6 o'clock in the morning, you're swallowing semolina. I cannot emphasize the importance of eating well. Morning, afternoon, night, you're McDonaldizing your life with takeaways. I cannot emphasize the importance of eating well. But healthy eating, it's important. The Bible says they were hungry, but Jesus, Told her, oh no, I know you guys have been working really hard. I think it's time that you relax, eat something. But it's one thing to eat the physical food, but maybe there's another dimension to this. What about the food for the soul? What about the food for the soul? Because the Bible tells us that man shall not eat or live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. We should not eat by McDonald's alone, but also we need spiritual food. We need spiritual food. And it's interesting because even though Jesus called them to eat, perhaps to eat, physical food, later we found that they ate fishes and bread, but also he invited them to have fellowship with him. And in that fellowship was word of encouragement from God, was them sharing their testimony about the things they've done. They were encouraging each other, sharing their testimony, and showing, and really, really what they were simply doing was bearing witness and eating spiritual food. The Bible tells us that we should taste and see that the Lord is good. We should feed on his word. Come with me by yourself. His word is sweeter than honey. His word is sweeter than honey. His word teaches, his word trains, his word fills you up, and his word satisfies. It is a food for the soul. But the third thing that we find in this text is a principle of bodily exercise. Step aside, step outside. The Bible tells us that Jesus told them to come with me by yourselves to a quiet place. To a quiet place. Step aside, step outside to a quiet place. Rest, I believe, is an invitation to step outside. To step outside and come with Jesus to a quiet place. A quiet place is a place of stillness. It is a place where we hear from God. It is a place where we are still before the Almighty. It is a place where we wait patiently for God. And so, as you even try to understand what it means to be in a quiet place, I think I like the way the Message Bible kind of defines or explains what a quiet place is in Matthew 6:6. Matthew 6, verse 6, if you have the Message Bible translation, it says, here is what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense his grace. It is a quiet place. A quiet place is a quiet, secluded place where there's no distractions. A quiet place is a place where there is no role play with God. You don't need to articulate your words with God. You don't need to speak Australian or British English. Some of us force ourselves to do that when we do corporate prayer. But in your quiet place, you talk to God heart to heart. It is a place of honest conversation. It is where you shift from you to God. It is where we sense his grace. And his grace is all about his elegance and beauty. That you're in a quiet place, just reflecting on his goodness brings you to tears. And he says, come with me to a quiet place. It is simply an opportunity to be in the same page with God. That's what being in a quiet place does for us. But there's something that I want to point out here, especially as we try to step outside. As we try to step outside to a quiet place. As we do that, we must remember that our rest must never exclude Jesus. Can you help me look at someone and tell the person, your rest must never exclude Jesus. As you step outside to a quiet place, as you try to rest, you must not exclude Jesus. The Bible tells us that the disciples, the apostles, retreated from the crowd to a quiet place with Jesus. To a quiet place with Jesus. Your rest must never exclude Jesus. Now, you know what? I'll recommend that you take a vacation. I'll recommend that you do something that allows you, that affords you to rest as often as possible. But do not take a vacation without Jesus. Your rest must never involve relationships that exclude Jesus. Your rest must never involve places that exclude Jesus. Your rest must never involve activities that exclude Jesus. Never rest and exclude Jesus. Can you help me look at someone and someone needs to hear that? Because sometimes we travel or go to places. I'm traveling on vacation, and we travel on vacation and do nasty things, excluding Jesus, and we're a different person. Our rest must never exclude Jesus. I have 5 minutes. And lastly, it's a T. Talk to someone. Can you help me look around and tell someone, talk to someone? I think that's a principle of relationship. Because if we must have good mental health and well-being, we must not do it by ourselves. We need people. We need to be in good company. Pastor Sam would always say, does he say? Monkey see, monkey do. And that's a different way that he puts it, that who you hang around with will determine what you become. The Bible tells us that the apostles gathered around Jesus, a relationship. Then, because so many people were coming and going, a relationship. Come with me by yourself to a place, a relationship. A relationship. There are two groups of people here. We see Jesus and the crowd. Let me talk about the crowd. You know, that in our world today, there is the crowd in the cloud. There's the crowd in our smartphones. So many things, so many people, so many news coming and going. I'm sure even now as we speak, some are on their phone on Facebook, watching the cloud in the wrong company. The crowd. The crowd. The crowd. The crowd. Talk to someone. You could talk to a crowd and obsess yourself with TikTok, with Facebook, with Twitter, with the unending arguments on the social media space in the cloud. Because in our world today, there is a crowd in a cloud. The cloud of social media. The cloud of unending flow of information. And we see that it's important. The Bible tells us that Jesus, knowing that these people there's a lot of crowd hovering around them, he dismissed the crowd because he knew that they wouldn't get rest. It would be difficult to get rest with a crowd. And some of us, even right now, we're struggling with the crowd in our own lives, the things that distract us. Flipping through your phones, your neighbor thinks you're reading your Bible, but you're just responding to a text message. It's a crowd. And Jesus said, dismiss the crowd and come with Jesus on your own to a quiet place and get some rest. Can you help me look at someone? Make sure you don't mutter the word out and say, dismiss the crowd. Come with Jesus by yourself. By yourself. I like the way this brother did it. Yeah. Dismiss the crowd. But also, I see in this, to talk to someone, it's an invitation to have a relationship with Jesus. Clearly, we saw two people, Jesus and the crowd. The crowd was wearing them out, but they wanted to have a company with Jesus. The crowd wanted their gifts. They wanted the power they had, but Jesus wanted a fellowship with them. And the text encourages us to talk to Jesus by ourselves. In two senses, we see the text encourages us to talk to someone. Talk to someone. You could choose to talk to the crowd. You could choose to talk to and have conversation and communication with your phone and all the nonsense or noisy negatives that's going on the social media. Or you could choose a friend that is closer than a brother, the Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Let me say something before I wrap up. There are three kinds of friends, of friendships. One is the constituents. Aristotle called that friendships of utility. Your constituents are simply those who are for what you are for. You know, they can stand for the same vision that you stand for. As long as you have that vision, they are your friends. But be careful with the constituents, because they will not stay in your life forever. And the problem is oftentimes we think that our constituents are people they are not. But your constituents can sometimes be the crowd. But secondly, we have the comrades. A comrade is someone that you share the same enemy with. In fact, Aristotle calls that friendships of pleasure. People that you have share the same enemy with. It could be at your workplace, both of you hate your boss, and you guys bond for that reason. It could even be at the church, both of you hate this one pastor, and you are bonding because of the same reason. Your comrades are people that you have a common enemy. But the problem with this, a comrade and a constituent, is once they have a different vision or goal, they shift gear. That's my alarm. Once the enemy has been defeated, they shift gear, and you get heartbroken. You're bitter. You can't trust anybody because you're choosing a constituent and a comrade, thinking that they are this third person, the confidants. Your confidants are people who are there for you. They love you unconditionally. They're in your life for who you are. Aristotle calls it the friendships of the good. And the problem is that sometimes we receive the constituents and the comrades as our confidants. But I have a word from God for you this morning. Man may fail you, but God will never fail you. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 1:19, it says, God never fails anyone. It is He who calls you to belong to His Son, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Are you looking for a confidant to talk to? Talk to Jesus. He said, come with me by yourself to a quiet place. Are you looking for a friend closer than a brother that is a confidant? Talk to Jesus, because He is your high priest. Talk to Him. Come with Him on your own. Pray to Him. Go back to Him if you've left Him. Come, He says, come with me on your own. Go to Jesus and find rest. Let's bow down our heads in prayer. You alone are my strength and shield. To you